Hey there, folks. Happy Saturday to you. Hope you're having a fantastic weekend. As you may have read on the blog, uh, it's been a little challenging over here. I had an air conditioning unit go out yesterday, so it's been a hectic weekend already. Anyway, let's go ahead and take a look at what's going on in the market. So, last couple of weeks have been pretty bullish, and I will tell you that yesterday, even though the markets held up really well on a very disappointing jobs number, I closed out a bunch of positions and raised cash once again. And listen, we are in the midst of a melt up. I was extremely impressed with the way the markets reacted yesterday. Uh, but to me, it just feels like there's much more risk to the downside than there is to of potential of what we can gain to the upside. And I could be wrong, but we've been melting up, and we could get some kind of a parabolic move because there is such a huge uh, you know short bias in the markets, and the markets could just continue to grind until we get some kind of a parabolic capitulation type move that makes all the shorts throw in the towel, and then we get a move down in the markets. We'll see. So, really disappointing jobs number. And then what did that do? That made everybody believe that potentially that takes the Fed out of raising the rates in June or July. And I'll tell you, I'm not sold that they are not going to raise the rate in June or July. We'll see. Janet Yellen, I believe, is supposed to speak next week, and that could be pretty interesting, hearing what she has to say. But they have been jawboning up the fact that they're going to raise the rates uh, within the next month or two, so much that if they don't do it, I mean, they lose all credibility in my mind. And not that they've had a whole lot of credibility anyway, but it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. Cybersecurity actually had a pretty good week last week, even after some disappointing earnings from Palo Alto Networks. And I think this is worth pointing out. Uh, it's interesting how the sector has been acting. Cyber and hack both have been moving pretty well. Let me go down to this real quick. But hack coming right up into the 200 EMA, 200 simple moving average, may find some resistance and pull back here. But the stock that really caught my eye and that I was watching on Friday, and listen, it's had a tremendous move, and this is pretty interesting because FireEye had disappointing earnings, right? And this thing has been grinding higher. And then there were some $18 calls that were picked up on Friday, which is pretty interesting. I was watching it kind of, it held up really well on Friday in a fairly weak tape. And it's almost like somebody knows something, right? So you got these $18 calls that are being bought. Hewlett Packard just did a deal where it looks like they could be freeing up some dough. And there's been speculation that FireEye may get, taken out by somebody. I'd like to see a pull back in FireEye, somewhere to like 1580 or so, before I got involved there. But I don't know. It almost is looking like somebody knows something is very interesting, and I think it's worth keeping an eye on for next week. Could present an opportunity for a trade, but it is a bit extended, right? I mean, it's had a nice run from basically $12.50 up to $16.89, off of a bad earnings report. So worth keeping an eye on that one next week. All right, so listen, let's go ahead and take a look at the indexes. So Nasdaq, coming up. So I was thinking that we were going to maybe close this gap right here, come up and test 5,000. Um, After that report on Friday, I mean, I've got to tell you, it wasn't just the report on Friday that was concerning to me. And I know that people are saying it was a one-off report because you had Verizon, which had 40,000, people that couldn't or that went into that report. But you know, my thing is that there have been a tremendous amount of companies that have been announcing layoffs, and I truly believe that those layoffs are starting to come into the jobs number. And we had a couple of things this week. Our economic data that we've been getting has not been strong. I mean, the housing numbers were pretty good, but other than that, ISM, there's a whole bunch of economic data points that just haven't been coming in all that great. And then car sales, we had Jamie Dimon this week come out and say there's a lot of subprime activity in car sales, and then we're at peak auto, and some of the auto manufacturers reported disappointing numbers, and to me that is concerning. So the Nasdaq, I thought maybe we were going to come up and test in this 5,000. This could be potentially be something like a double top is what we could be looking at here, right? I mean, we'll wait and see, but right now, basically, we've come up and tested this area. If we roll over here, this could be the making of a double top. So let's take a look at the sector that I was really paying close attention to last week into this week, and also actually for the last couple of weeks. So, we had the IBB. We wanted to see it break above basically 270. Then we wanted to see it consolidate above 270. And then we thought potentially come up and test this 289 area, right? Come up and test this trend line here, test the 200 EMA. And we've had a tremendous run. Now, this was in anticipation of ASCO, which is happening this weekend, right? So there could be some significant news that comes out of this ASCO conference that gives the IBB some fuel to move higher. There could also be some really disappointing news that comes out of the ASCO conference that could push the IBB lower. So the fact that it's run this far into the event could now become a sell the news type event. And what we would need to see for me to stay bullish on the IBB would be for us to take out 289 with conviction, close above it, close above the 200-day, close above this trend line, right? Then it would look fairly bullish to me, right? We could come up and test the $300 mark, and if we take out 300, maybe it's game on all again for the IBB. But the political climate for biotechs and pharma is still pretty scary. So I think you gotta respect this move that we've had. If you've got some profits, you lock them in, and you see what next week develops. So last week, the IWM, the small caps, was something that I really liked the look of, and what I wanted to see was a close above 115, which we did, which was great. And then what I was hoping to see was us consolidate a little bit over the 115 and have this 114.90 act as support, which it did. Now, the question is whether it will continue to do that next week. So, with everyone thinking that the Fed has taken a potential rate raise off of the table, the dollar took a big hit on Friday, right? Let's take a look at that real quick. And of course, we all know what ran like a madman on Friday, which was gold and gold miners. So look at, we had a huge gap down in the dollar, which, drove JNUG, Nugget, GDX and GDXJ. They all had incredible days. Gold had a nice move. Silver even had a nice little move. So what will be interesting to see is if we get a continuation of this move next week, right? And it does appear as though the dollar could likely go lower. And if that happens, you know, whether a weak dollar would be good for the multinationals and not so much for the small caps. So we'll see how this all plays out next week. But there are some other areas that are a little bit concerning. So retail, it looks like maybe it's kind of stalling out a little bit. It's had a really nice run in a fairly short period of time. Transportation looks like maybe it is stalling out a little bit, right? And it actually had a fairly decent recovery on Friday, but it does look as though it's starting to get tired. So uh, energy, no, that's the minings. I'm sorry. Let me go to energy. So we've been kind of hanging out down here, right? And trying to determine which way we're going to go. And the action in oil, it hasn't been all that great. We didn't get any kind of a consensus out of OPEC, and maybe oil just needs more time to consolidate. We'll see what happens next week, but energy has not been acting all that strong. SMH, which this is one that just really has been impressive. Uh, and this is what I mean by a melt up. It's they're not significant moves higher, but it just keeps melting higher, right? A little bit higher every day. Managed to close higher on Friday, well within the Bollinger Bands, but coming up into an area of potential price resistance. Actually, right around 58.30 or so, right in that range. Okay, 58. Let's call it 58. So, and this is where my concern comes in, right? It's like, how much more do we have to the upside, and what's our potential risk to the downside? And if we really do roll over significantly, I think our risk is much greater to the downside, and that's why I decided to raise cash. And let's see here. Let's take a look at the S&P 500. 2115. We talked about that last week. I mean, that is the area that we need to break over with conviction and hold. And I think we're going to have a little bit of difficulty doing that, right? Next week is going to be real telling. Let's take a look at volatility. Volatility. There is no fear out there, right? Look at the UVXY and TVIX. There is absolutely no fear. Apparently, the markets are just going to keep going higher, right? And to me, that just seems to be really scary that everybody is so complacent. Home builders consolidating out a little bit. Let's take a look at aerospace and defense continues to be impressive with its strength, grinding higher. Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, Northrop Grumman, we've talked about those in the past, and those continue to work. Let's take a look at financials, which had a bit of a weak day on Friday, right? Because now the rate increase is off the table, at least until Monday, until we see what they say, Janet Yellen says. But had a little bit of a pullback, did have a recovery. I mean, like I said, the bounce back in the indexes was fairly impressive on Friday. The industrials consolidating at an area of potential price resistance. Listen, I guess what I'm saying is I think this is a time that we need to be a bit cautious, right? Raising cash, I felt like it was a good, prudent move. I'm not concerned about what's going to be announced or said over this weekend that could impact the markets on Monday. I'm going to wait and see how I'm going to let the markets absorb what happened with the jobs or the jobs number, and see how it reacts come Monday. See if we get anything from overseas that might impact the markets. Let's take a look at high yield real quick, and then we'll go and take a look at gold and the gold miners. So high yield, it looks as though, I mean, we're coming up into this area of resistance, right? We'll see how this acts next week. I mean, it's holding up fairly well above the 200 EMA. We'll see what happens next week. Let's take a look at GDX, GDXJ, right? Huge gap right into resistance. Could this see a potential, a massive, massive volume, right? Could we see a potential red to green move in that? Absolutely, we could. Same thing with GDXJ. Gold had a big gap up, right? GLDX. And then let's take a look at the real crazy ones, the Nugget and JNUG. Right? They all look almost identical. Close at the high of the day. They're nearly at the high of the day. Coming up into that trend line. Let's take a look at JNUG. Another one, big gap up into right into price resistance and closed nearly right at the high of the day. So there's going to be, I would imagine, a lot of travel within, a lot of volatility within those indexes, right? I think gold and silver are something that you want to pay close attention to, along with the dollar. Big gap up in silver, closed nearly at the high of the day as well. So, let's see how the market interprets this stuff over the weekend. I'm sure there's going to be a tremendous amount of articles that come out and different points of view. I'm personally, like I said, I'd rather be cautious than bullish at this time. So I'm just neutral. I'm waiting to see what develops in the markets, what happens out of this ASCO conference this weekend. See how that impacts the IBB. If by chance the IBB starts to roll over, keep in mind that you can always play LABD and you can play LABU, right? LABU looks like it was going to pull. Looks like we had a little bit of a pullback as the IBB pulled back on Friday, and those could be a couple of areas to look to play if things go wrong for the biotech sector, right? And then there's one other thing that I did want to, what was interesting is a lot of the like the Brazil ETF and the EEM, right? EEM is playing with the 200-day moving average, right? Had a nice little pop off of that jobs report. I think you're going to see possibly some positive action in some of the international stuff, right? Emerging market stuff, I should say. Okay, I think that's it. I'm gonna wrap this up. I will be doing stocks to watch for next week live on Ticker TV tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. Las Vegas time. And if you can, join us. And if you can't, but you have a couple of stocks you'd like to ask about, go ahead and email me or tweet them to me, and I will do my best to get them on the watch list for tomorrow. So basically, what the position I am neither bearish nor bullish. I am on the sidelines and waiting to see what the markets do next week. Okay, this is a time that I have the yellow caution flag up. So, all right, I will see you all either tomorrow, and if not, I'll see you next week. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.